So this is another album that is coming to us from a patron, and I want to give you a big shout out to Matthew Zealot for his top tier patron request. This gives him 3 albums, so this is going to be the second album. Very excited for this one, and this is another one that I didn't know going in, so I'm excited to dive in and find out what this is all about. Let's do this. A Sense of Change by Sages Even, and I have to really be careful of how I say that because I always want to say Sages Even, but it's Sages Even. So Sages Even is a German progressive metal band from the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. These guys were following the same kind of suit as, say, the Fates Warning or Dream Theater would be, by carrying the torch of a progressive metal and that type of a style. What kind of furthers these guys away from the Fates Warning, the Queensryche, or the Dream Theaters of the time is... Actually, I don't exactly know. They do sound very similar to that type of a style. I guess the main thing, this A Sense of Change being the only album I've heard from them, they're able to blend very well a very hard-hitting and a very softer and somber approach, and not necessarily within the two times simultaneously. And so the overall flavor of this is definitely that kind of early Rush and a very raw feel of that progressive metal approach. This is seen throughout a number of tracks within, the Prelude, Ode to Sisyphus, and The Waking Hour, and Behind Closed Doors. These 3 tracks that open up the album and kind of provide the first half, kind of. I think the first half would actually stop with A Change of Seasons. These 3 tracks have that kind of raw, very energetic, very unpolished approach. And in this sense, it feels very hunkered down and very well structured. This is definitely where the comparison of like that early Dream Theater and Rush definitely feels like, especially with The Waking Hours, with a very strange and complex time signature, very fast or at least complex playing on the guitars. You're not like shredding it, and they're not like straight up brutalizing the sounds. It feels a lot more controlled. It feels a lot more honed in. And yeah, it's not as brutal as a lot of the other bands of the time were doing. Not even though I've said it multiple times, it wasn't even as raw as some of the other ones. And probably one of my favorite moments, and probably my favorite moments on this album, are the more subdued area. And this is kind of what puts Sages Even on a better footing than some of the other contemporary bands of the times. Like, this guy came out in the early 90s, so this more subdued, more humbled, much more quiet approach. Change of Seasons has a lot more of a fun flavor within being a little bit more somber. It's not quite overly all that melodramatic. It's much more of a reflective track, and I like that they utilize the strings and very an acoustic set in this, and it connects very heavily on me, more so than any other track on this album. But I do enjoy the more somber approaches that are in the last 2 tracks, the Epigram for the Last Straw and These Empty Places. Both of these tracks do start off in a very somber, very slow, very humble place, and then they grow from there. And this is where they show that progressive style, especially within the latter half of the album. Dimensions being over 8 minutes, and then the final track of being almost 10 with These Empty Places show us a little bit more of a longer stretch of music. Now, this album does feel a little bit on the long side as well, and this is one of the knocks that I do have against it. It is just under 50 minutes, so it is the usual runtime of a typical LP, but for me, it does feel quite long. I always found myself kind of wandering within any of the sittings. I've been listening to this album for almost a month now, and nothing's really grabbing hold, and maybe this is just me being so removed from the time that it came out. The riffs that we get from the band members, like Marcus Stefan on guitars, it doesn't really provide a good meaty guitar riff at any point. Like, there's no point where I'm like, there's a good meaty guitar riff. Joji Kaiser on vocals, his vocal work really stands out. And that is one thing that I did notice throughout the album, is how prominent his vocal works were. This puts him ahead of a lot of other contemporary progressive metal bands of the time. I really like his singing style, and the lyrics that are found on this as well are quite juicy. So overall, this one is an album, even though it was requested from me, It did feel a little bit overwhelmed, and I did feel a little turned off by the music. And again, I think that's just me being so far removed of the zeitgeist of the time. I would recommend this for anybody that's going back and almost like an archaeologist, going back at the genesis of where progressive metal came from. This is a great example of that type of music. But other than that, I can't overly recommend it outside of those who really like early Dream Theater, really like Fate's Warning, or really like Queensryche. So honestly, I'd have to say skip this album. This isn't one that I really connected with. And so it's a shame that I have to, I wanted to give an honest opinion of an album that a patron did request for me. And that's always what I'm going to do. I'm always going to give an honest opinion. So that's about it from A Sense of Change by Siege's Evan. And I have to be careful of how I say that because I always want to say it a different way. What did you guys think of this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, let me know by commenting down below. Thank you once again, Matthew, for suggesting this. Thank you so much for donating to my Patreon. You guys, it really means a lot. If you guys really want to donate to my Patreon, please do so down below. There's some great perks. You guys, I don't hide anything behind a paywall. Everything you get will be more of like steering of the ship, essentially. You get to request live streams, you get to request album reviews, and if you donate a lot, like Matthew has, you get a worst to best as well. So look out for that. I'm planning to release my next worst to best in December. Put down your theories of what it's going to be. If you follow me on Twitter, you already know what it's going to be by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Big shout out to Matthew. Thank you so much, Matthew. Yeah, until next time, notes out. Da 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 da.